It's Spoilerin time, the companion show to Cordkillers. Cordkillers is a show where Brian Brushwood and myself, Tom Merritt, tell you about how to watch things and what's coming up to watch. And this is the show after we watch them where we get to talk about them. This week, we'll be talking about Deadwood, Season 3, Episode 9, Better Call Saul, Season 4, Episode 2, a little bit about Season 1, too, since Brian's finally caught up, and Preacher, Season 3, Episode 9. But Brian, where do we start?
Man, we start with our silly, goofy, dumb game that doesn't count for anything, and whoever's the winner, whether it's you or me, Tom, I don't care.
Summer Movie Draft!
The Summer Movie Draft.
You sounded sad, Brian. Why are you sad?
Man, dude, Team John Trekker continues to absolutely slay it. If you're not familiar, we play a fantasy movie league with box office drafts, and I think this might be the single biggest, crushingest victory in the history of the movie draft. Team John Trekker nailed it. They bought the movies Rampage, I Feel Pretty, Book Club, Incredibles 2, The First Purge, Mission Impossible, Fallout, and they're at almost $1.1 billion. Next place is you, Tom, with $769 million. Third place is me, and Justin with $735. Look, it's a fine game. Congratulations to X Modem. There's nothing left good that's coming out, right?
Well, hold on. Crazy Rich Asians was great.
Well, okay.
And had 35 million. When you say good, I think you meant big.
Sorry. Yeah.
Not quality
financially.
Good.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. And no, this is the last weekend, actually. Slender Man for Team Chips Bitch and Replicas for Team Cordkillers come out. But neither one of those have the potential to even make much of a move in the standings, to be honest.
I'll tell you what, man. Here's the thing is I think, Chips Bitch, I guess, will be second to last, which just makes me feel like C. Robert Cargill, while he's great at writing Marvel movies, is maybe like a savant at picking bad movies that he expects to make money.
We'll see how Slender Man does. I guess it's... no, Cordkillers is probably going to bring up the rear. Chips Bitch is pretty safe. They could catch Team Tell It anyway if Crazy Rich Asians wasn't going to keep making money, which it probably is. So yeah. I think the standings as they stand right now for the main draft are probably locked.
Yep. Congratulations to two jerks.
Yeah. I mean, you mean John Trek. You kind of fused Trek and John
Brett and
together.
John, like John Teasdale and Brett Rounceville. Congratulations, you both. I love you both.
Yeah, you guys suck. I mean, you are suckering.
We're adults. Let's review. We'll review the things. What are we doing next?
Oh, Preacher.
Tom.
Yeah.
I believe I've said more than one time that Preacher is like a beautiful. You said you like it a lot. Yeah. Ray of sunshine.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel it this time.
Oh, really? That's interesting. I didn't feel. Hard for me to say. I watched it in an airport, and the scene of the Allfather exploding felt over the top to me. I was also trying to hide it from anyone sitting near me in the airport terminal.
Oh, you had that experience of like,
yeah.
The last time or the first time I realized this was a thing was I was watching the Mr. Show episode about the kid who tried to dive into a vat of acid, and it's the head of David Cross with sausage legs and fingers as a puppet. And I was cracking up, but I was horrified if anybody saw over my shoulder. And I realized like that's what you went through with this episode.
Yeah, no, absolutely. In fact, the very end of the episode, I had to pause, board the plane and finish it on the plane before takeoff. And so as everybody's filing past, you see the great line where he's like, "You don't murder people," and a big mound of intestines falls from the ceiling. And it's like, well, not in that way anyway.
Yes.
Yeah. And of course I'm like, don't look at the mound of intestines falling around, please. So yeah, I kind of felt like it was a bit gratuitous, but I couldn't tell if that was just because of my situation. Otherwise, I actually really loved the bits with Tulip and the Angel of Death. The stuff on the bus maybe dragged a little bit. Is that another thing that bugged you?
Yeah, so this episode, in general, I feel like Preacher is extraordinarily good at going somewhere. And this episode definitely felt like they went out of their way to make sure all three contained storylines made zero progress in any direction whatsoever. You have Jesse, who I mean, I guess he gets out, but now he's at a standoff, and he and Harry Starr are like, "Oh, so I suppose we're adversaries again."
Well, but Jesse ends up coming back to his grandma's place at the end because he's got Genesis. I don't think that changes your point any. It's like, yeah, he got away from the Allfather and killed the Allfather, which we sort of, he had Chekhov's gun in his pocket, right? Even though he didn't use the gun per se, that was happening. That was for sure going to happen. And then, of course, once he got Genesis back, he was going to go back to his grandma. So no surprises. And I think that's the biggest thing with Preacher is you always love the twist where you're like, oh, I didn't see that coming. And that's really fun.
Yeah, no, okay. Oh, that's a really good filter. Let me run the rest of it through that. The romance with bro / literal romance,
the Cassidy
with him and Lasat 2.0. That kind of went nowhere. Where do we end with that? He's like nailed to a
we got
pool.
Almost to a twist. He's talking to the mother, who's been sort of this ineffectual thing, and she's like, well, I'm not going to let you down.
Right.
And
she reveals that she knows exactly what's happening.
Please call her on my behalf and apologize, hoping that she'll call not to be able to get in touch with her, and then the whole charade comes falling down. But we didn't see it come falling down, so we don't know.
Right. And meanwhile, like literally nothing interesting happened in that whole thread, which normally that's one of the most interesting threads they've been playing with.
Nothing surprising happened for sure. Yeah.
And the bus.
I mean, the bus, you get a big surprise at the end when Hilter ends up being right, and his buddy from the subway shop or whatever brought the SS, but I don't understand how that happened.
Well, and also they were a little bit heavy-handed on that. Like they telegraphed that surprise pretty far in advance, where it's like, okay, well, you say it once and I might have been surprised, but you've said it twice. Oh, wait, you're saying it a third time? I definitely know how all this ends. However, having said all of that, there's a moment that I deeply adore. One thing that Preacher is still very, very good at, especially on this episode, is setting up expectations and then subverting them. And in this case, like the fact that Tulip takes a moment to explain what's going to happen when she tosses the chains down onto the differential and winds around the axle or whatever. And then, number one, I loved the line drawings on there. That seems like something we would do on Modern Rogue or whatever. And then number two, I love the fact that they're all like, oh yeah, but also that didn't happen. Like,
totally didn't work.
All of that was great.
I loved that, the line drawings and everything, and I love that they're experimenting with the format that way. I did not really like Harry Starr's like newsreel like explanation of the apocalypse. That fell flat for me.
Yeah, I think that's just over familiarity with that format because we've all played Fallout and they mined that territory pretty effectively. So I don't know. Here's the thing that made me feel better. Was when the episode was over, the rolling into next week, it was like, get ready for the season finale. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, wait. Oh, that's right. Preacher's like opposite rules from Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones, the next to last episode is always the best episode.
That's where all the stuff happens.
Right. Whereas Preacher, I guess, the next to last episode is just all garbage to keep you busy for whatever happens at the end.
It's moving everything into place.
Yeah.
Like Cassidy's nailed to a pool table. How could he escape? Preacher is back to fight Grandma, but she knows that she expects he's coming. How will that go down? And Tulip is on her way to hell and she can't get away until the SS appears. Like, what will happen next week?
Until good old Hilter, which, by the way, I think that's a really smart thing to give us another word to say for that character. Hilter is a much easier word to say in public than...
I definitely can say it without feeling nearly as bad.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Although probably I should anyway. Well, let's save our guns for next week. When we see the finale, there'll be lots to talk about. Let's move on then, shall we?
Better Call Saul.
Officially, we're spoiling episode 2 of season 4 because we talked about episode 1 with Bryce last week, but that was only because Brian hadn't quite seen it yet. You've now caught up on both of them, and I know you have an anecdote.
There are 4. Are there 4 episodes of Better Call Saul?
There are 2.
2.
Okay, because I could have sworn I saw
PlayStation View just lists the next two because I watched it earlier. It lists the upcoming 2 weeks.
Okay, because I'm so glad to hear that. Okay, so let's start with the side jag of my annoyance with now I know what you guys were talking about. That's some double down triple F word BS that they would call Better Call Saul a 2-hour block of programming when the second hour is definitely just the pilot to that Big Lebowski as a series thing.
Yeah, we talked about that off the show a little bit last week.
What you're talking about.
Where they put the 2 episodes. I don't remember them saying at the beginning it was a 2-hour thing. The runtime definitely says it.
Okay, so my experience on PlayStation View was, say, I want to watch Better Call Saul. It says, would you like the DVR version or the on-demand version? I select the DVR version, and I see a 2-hour block of programming show up, and I see things go across all the way, and I think, holy crap, they did, as many shows do, a 2 episodes rock block at the beginning. And then it gets to the end of the first episode, and I'm like, well, I guess we're going on to the second one. And the second one was definitely just straight up an episode of something that was not Better Call Saul, that in no rational universe should have been labeled Better Call Saul. Yeah. And I didn't like it. I was not a fan.
Okay. Yeah. No, nobody likes it when the UI has a mistake.
Okay. Mistake. Mistake implies
they definitely do say after the episode, hey, the video for next week's teaser is in the first commercial break of this next show. Like, I watched the on-demand version and it had that. And so I don't know about the DVR, but that on-demand one was intentional. Yeah. That was weird.
I didn't have any of those problems, so therefore they're not problems. No, I don't know. I can see why that would be annoying.
So I texted you guys. For those who have not listened to Night Attack recently, I dropped some heavy, real family stuff that's going on right now. My brother is in a very, very bad medical place, and it's super, super touch and go. And I heard you guys talk through a lot of what happens in the first episode, but it was another thing to gather in the room with me and my wife Bonnie and say, well, let's watch Better Call Saul. Let's get caught up on it. I'm gonna have to find.
You don't need to
read
your text messages.
Well, I mean, Brian, if I may, Better Call Saul this season begins with Jimmy dealing with his brother's death.
Yeah, here we go. So I wrote. Here's exactly what I wrote. So, episode 1 of Better Call Saul. Let's do this. Sit down with Bonnie, and in the first 20 minutes we get 1, somebody losing consciousness in a medical emergency at his place of work, which is what happened to my brother.
And that's Salamanca.
Saul. What's that?
Salamanca, right?
No, that's Saul. In the opening black and white thing
of him
right,
having in the black and white of episode 1. Yes, gotcha. All right.
Right. 2, somebody finding out his brother's dead and wondering what responsibility he bears for enabling his brothers on a healthy lifestyle. Because in this case, Saul Goodman, of course, was taking care of it and feeding into this crazy idea that he was allergic to electricity or whatever. And meanwhile, my brother...
Yeah, go ahead.
My brother currently in a coma. Unclear whether or not I'll ever see the guy I grew up with again. That hit deep. And then number 3, somebody contacting the loved one of the deceased and using it as a platform to make that contact as painful as possible, which I have confessed, both to you guys, I guess this is the first time publicly, that I've had these fleeting thoughts of really dark thoughts of what to say to Jay's ex-wife about this. And of course, these things bubble up out of nowhere and you process them and they go away. But only I'm watching somebody intentionally do that in the first 20 minutes of Better Call Saul. And finally, the spouse of the surviving brother feeling emotionally isolated and estranged, or as Bonnie called it, quote, well, that's 4 for 4 in the first 20 minutes. Like, it was heavy. And I gotta be honest, Tom, I don't know that I can divorce where I'm at right now from the experience that I'm having watching this show. All I know is it was very painful all around, because even the second episode that's all about Hector Salamanca and his tribe or whatever still takes place in an ICU, and still, it's still, I don't know how to process watching it, but I do know that I can't put it off forever. Like at some point, I'm gonna have to start encountering art again and thinking about how it means through the lens of the life I'm living. So there was like 4 times during that 2-hour block that Bonnie and I were like, "Do you want to keep going?" And it's like, well, it just seems like we have to. So I will say that my favorite moment of identity with the first 2 episodes was when, by the way, what is Jimmy's girlfriend's name? Her. You know who I'm talking about. She comes in, says, "I'm here to represent Jimmy." This is while he's out ostensibly. Kim comes in and just goes nuts on Hamlin. I felt this very deep, weird pride, and I paused it and I was like, "That's you, isn't it?" And Bonnie was just like, "I was thinking the same thing." Like it was I don't know. It's a very complicated time for me to be watching something that I like a lot. It's of course all well done. Nacho's the best character on the entire show. I am increasingly convinced after having seen this that so Tom, you weren't around, but we spent like 30 minutes in the after talk for the patrons talking about this little segment about the shape of stories, about whether it's like, you start off good, everything goes terrible, and you're come back better at the end, or whether it's like everything's awful and then everything's great and then the clock strikes midnight and you lose your glass slipper and you go down. And we were wondering if Better Call Saul will be a different tale than Breaking Bad, possibly one that picks up only in the black and white post Breaking Bad era, and possibly, wouldn't it be great if it was the kind of show that has, because we know clearly Jimmy loses Kim at some point, but wouldn't it be great if Kim showed up in the black and white era and the two of them really did live happily ever after? I suppose I'm irrationally holding on to that, given how crazy things are on the personal side for me right now.
Yeah. Well, it's the tragedy versus comedy, to oversimplify it, right? Like that's the classic 2 types of stories. And of course there's more than 2 types of stories, but a lot of people argue that they all have roots in tragedy versus comedy. And those are the forms that you're talking about there. Like whether they prevail in the end or not, basically. And you're hoping that it's a comedy, not a tragedy. And comedy in the classic Shakespearean sense, not comedy in the way we use it now to mean funny.
I mean, I'm fine with it being whatever it is it wants to be. That's up to Vince Gilligan. That's not up to me. But I do feel like that would be a delightful and pleasant surprise if it turned out that Better Call Saul, a show that started, the journey that began with what looked like happy gone wacky, oh wait, no, it's dark as hell, oh crap, everything ends in disaster, could have a follow-up show that begins with like, well, we know where this ends, and then surprise us with genuine delight at the end.
Well, I know you're a surprise fetishist.
I am.
So
I totally am.
You want it to surprise you no matter what, right? That doesn't matter. Even if it's not Kim coming back, something.
Yeah.
You want something to be not what you expect.
In fact, put that on my tombstone. Here lies Brian Brushwood, surprise fetishist.
And then you pop out and you're like, I'm not dead. No, I actually have a lot to say about what you were experiencing with the difficulty, or not even difficulty, maybe challenge is a better word, of watching Better Call Saul, given your current experience.
Sure.
I mean, it goes to the heart of what I've been saying over and over when people are like, this is a bad movie. Why do you like this? Or you must like this. I like this. We all bring different experiences, and you're going to have different experiences in different times of your life when you watch the same thing. And we've all run into that thing where we had a beloved movie or TV show and then we go back, watch it later, and we're like, it's not as good now that I'm all grown up, right? And it's because you're bringing different things. Everybody brings different things in, and you're experiencing it in a really intense way right now of like, oh, this is a show that I experienced very differently and would have experienced differently weeks ago. than I am now, because all of these things have different meanings for me because they relate to what I'm experiencing. And that's really important when evaluating a story, is like, this is going to be uncomfortable for people who've had experiences like that. It's not going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be funny for somebody else who hasn't had that experience. It's going to be funny for somebody who's had that experience and has a different way of relating to their intensity, right? So I'm not saying you have to keep watching, but if you decide you can, I think it'll be really interesting to explore how you feel about this story now.
Yeah. Separate issue. Episode 2, you have that moment where Mike Ehrmantraut steals somebody's badge to was that episode 2?
He does like a penetration test in episode 1.
Oh, sorry.
That we all think is really cool. And then in episode 2, Lydia rakes him over the coals. Like, why are you doing that?
So in that moment, they did a really clever thing in that they got time neutral cars, bicycles, styles of clothing. And in that moment, you have this awkward thing where the kid, runs into something or whatever, and this bald dude talks to the kid and admonishes him or whatever. It's like a 3 to 4 minute vignette. But in that, they did such an expert job of perfectly having that character talk in the same cadence, style, and accent as Mike Ehrmantraut that it made me think, oh wait, is this like a flashback? This is young Mike Ehrmantraut or whatever. And then it turns out like, nope, it's current day. He just stole that dude's badge. I thought that was brilliant. I loved, as you know, I am a surprise fetishist.
I did not make that connection of the cadence and style of the talking at all. I have to go back and watch that.
Oh my God. Like watch it again. And it's like, the dude is, somebody in his mid 40s who's bald. He'd be like, what do you think you're doing? You think you're just going to drive by like that? No, that's not the way you do it. Like he sounded like he was doing an impression of Mike Ehrmantraut. I am certain that was meant to keep us off of our footing, or maybe it was a random coincidence. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I did have the experience of not knowing if that was a flashback or what it was. Like I was definitely put out of sorts in that respect until we figured it out. That was fun. Did you get enough Nacho in episode 2?
Yeah, I did.
Mike Bonded?
I like Nacho best when I feel like he's not in chains. And we spent an awful lot of the first 2 seasons of him being imprisoned in various ways. And for a brief moment, I was like, oh my goodness, I can't wait to see what Nacho does now that he's free, now that he could do whatever he wants. And immediately by the end of the second episode, they had a press release saying, by the way, Nacho's back in chains. And I was like, oh. So I was bummed about that.
All right. Anything else about BCS?
No, just if you're confused about any of the personal stuff that I alluded to, listen to last week's Night Attack. I think 13 minutes into the episode, we bring you up to speed on what's going on with my brother.
All right, let's talk about Deadwood. Amateur night. It all sort of revolves around the idea that Langrish is going to have an amateur night, and he's recruiting people to perform. And there's this lovely scene at the end that sort of brings the camp together as everyone has their various talents play out, and Langrish is the circus master. But the meat of the episode is sort of between that and in the maneuvering of the Pinkertons. And how they sort of challenged the Earps, and how that makes Seth say, if your forestry claim isn't proven out, maybe you guys should leave. It's going to cause trouble. Also, we see Merrick get payback from Hearst for printing the letter, and it's the first time we've seen Merrick bent over and beaten up, I think, right?
Yeah, and also it's the first time that we've seen anything less than professionalism and android-like devotion to the Telegraph from his Russian roommate.
Pushed him over the edge. Also, we're seeing Aunt Lou pushed to the edge as well when Hearst informs her that her son is dead, and it doesn't really do anything to disabuse her of the notion that it might be Hearst's fault. Just kind of says, like, he's dead. He doesn't try to claim it. right? He kind of assumes that she won't blame him, and I think she's going to blame him.
Well, she should, because he is. And because, like, even as a viewer, I'm like, I don't believe you for one moment. I don't believe anything you say. I don't believe anything you do. I think you're a piece of garbage. I think you're obsessed and insane. And so far you've been lucky. And I can't wait to be there when your luck runs out, Hearst.
Yeah, that's definitely what they're building us up for. And then the former CEO of Hooli, Commissioner Jerry, returns to town and is, I guess, trying to make us care about the integration of Deadwood into the Dakotas again. Yeah.
This is Ned from Groundhog Day, right?
Also Ned from Groundhog Day, yes.
You know what? I feel about him on Deadwood exactly how I felt about him in Groundhog Day. Like, you're back? All right.
Yeah.
And by the way, nothing but love for the actor. He's super talented. He's great.
Yeah. Am I missing anything big here?
No,
I guess the widow Garrett, or no, she's Mrs. What's her face now? Sorry, not Garrett.
I would have liked to have
We had some bank scenes. That's all I remember.
I would have liked to have seen more of the romantic development with
Mrs. Ellsworth.
with Joni and Calamity Jane. Like, I feel like there's really something special there, and I would have liked to have seen more of that.
A little bit unrealistic that Jane. I think they're playing it realistic. That Jane's going to be like, I'm going to steer clear of any kind of attachments.
Sure.
You know, especially attachments that the rest of the camp might not look kindly about.
Yeah.
So.
I agree, and I understand all of that, but
and that I don't think that means it's the end of that story either. I think it's just this is what she would do at this point. So we see her avoiding Joni.
This is the episode that begins with forgive me, Raylan,
Seth Bullock
giving the. Is it this episode or the previous episode that began with him giving the code to the safe 6 times to.
Oh, yeah. No, I think you're right.
Yeah. So it's like you can tell he's waiting serious repercussions.
Also, a really good password for that era.
Okay.
Mnemonic device.
That's a fine mnemonic device. As a fan of LastPass, I'm going to say if you can remember your password, it's not complicated.
Don't use
enough.
that password now in LastPass. That's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about for the 1800s. It's a sophisticated obfuscation method.
Are we about to hit the last episode?
This is episode 9 of season 3. There are 3 more episodes left.
Oh, okay. So unlike Preacher, we're going to get 3 more. All right.
Yeah. We're still going. All right, folks. I hope you're enjoying watching along with us. Be sure to come back next time for more discussion of these and other fine shows. We'll spoil you again next week.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.